Imagine by Bernard King and Nicholas Lumarine. Episode 3. Jerome, without knowing it, is about to be, in the nicest possible way, kidnapped by Gemma. Now she has her man in her weird and strange world, her project can move forward. For Jerome, his predictable, habitual, and calm world is about to change forever, with consequences he could never imagine. So, where are you taking me? She spoke straight ahead for better effect. Startled, he stiffened, trapping her arm hard against his body. Had she had an expression, with just her profile, all he could have seen was half of it. I don't usually get picked up on Tuesdays. His voice was London, with a trace of an earlier life. Yes, a city boy would be acceptable. A foreign or heavy regional accent would not fit into her picture. Her age range had been 40 to 45, around 6 foot something that moved easily and upright. She had already rejected several with even just a trace of a slouch. You have been picked up this week. She had to keep ahead. She must always make the pace, keep him curious. I realize I must be a bit of a surprise. Stating the obvious without resolution increased the surprise. But you must have been in the forces. Her turn inward, and with her free hand taking his, completed his kidnap and total confusion. It's the way you carry yourself, your confident step. 10 seconds, not bad to get him in her grip. They walked in silence. He had not attempted to disentangle her, still occupied, she assumed, by her full frontal assault. She was pleased with herself. She was working well. Suddenly, their walk slowed, and her grip was gently eased. Her arm was released as he halted. I live here. He paused by a front gate. With my wife. The blue eyes were challenging. She glanced unseeing at his house as she timed her next move. Her card, ready in her right hand, pushed into his left. I must see you again. She allowed her kiss on his cheek to linger for a thoughtful 2 seconds before, with what she considered was a stunning smile, she turned away. Soon. She refused to look back, and at the corner, annoyance tightened her lips. So he had a wife. Of course he would have. Most men of 40-ish were married. If they were not, they were either gay, divorced, or bachelors with hang-ups. The wife would have to be sorted. She could not mess any more with further searching. The man from the military was number one. She had no idea where she was, and there were no taxis on the prowl. A number 65 brought her here, and a number 65 would take her back. Waiting at the bus stop, she carefully noted his address in her phone. His name and anything else she wanted to know about him would be available at nosecrets.com. That was the huge plus of the internet. Clicks plus cash disgorged anything. Leaving the bus, she found the car windscreen decorated with a parking ticket. Carefully folding the irritation, she dropped it into a refuse bin. It was his car, so her husband could take care of it. A glance at her watch told her it was well past the 2 bottles of whiskey that he would be sleeping off, before waking up to his evening switch to wine. The apartment was in darkness, but not in silence. Heavy snoring rattled along the hall as she entered, and to her annoyance, it was coming from her bedroom. It had been agreed between the solicitors he would keep out of her sanctuary, just one of the conditions he had to honour in their new contract. Nicholas Lumarine was stretched diagonally across her bed, his gaping mouth gasping in air, loading it for the next disgusting rumble. Fortunately, the whiskey tumbler, upturned beneath his limp hand, had poured its contents across the carpet, turning what had been a burning cigarette into a dead brown stain. A month ago she would have exploded, pushing him off the bed and dragging him out of the room before scrubbing and washing up his mess. Dispassionately, she closed the door. It did not matter anymore. The cleaner could clean up the debris. She would no longer conceal her husband's addictions, and definitely not now that her new project was about to start. With a final glance at the empty corner around which his quality lady had turned, Jerome Archer pushed open his front door and looked up at the word and waited. But the misery did not bite. The usual wave of self-pity did not wash over him. The punch in his guts was missing. For the first time in 5 years, sorry had not taken his evening and mangled it. Puzzled, he closed the door and leaned back, the flap of the letterbox digging into his backside. Sorry was a small word written on a small card that he had mounted in a small frame and hung on the wall opposite his front door. It was his reminder each time he entered his house of what bitches women could be. Gemma Lumarine's perfume would not release him, clinging and reminding, obliterating everything until he found himself in his kitchen, making himself a cup of tea on automatic that he did not want. She thinks I'm a respectably married man, he said to the teapot, yet she still gave me her card. Without waiting for the teapot to answer, he moved around the house, opening the windows and doors to the garden, a daily task. Habits were necessary. Most of them he knew were futile, like cleaning his car every week, even when it had not been used. But habits had kept him sane when his world was sliding away from him. Today his movements were quicker, the mundane job completed in half the time, giving him a pause, as fresh air sucked into the room to think and to read. Her card established Gemma Lumarine lived in Berkeley Square. Of course she did. He could not think of anywhere else in the world she would really fit. Lumarine. It was an unusual name that he realized he had heard before. Despite a full minute of swills of untasted tea, no memories were prompted by the gold embossed surname. The telephone number was an 07, very cosy and private. No husband to hear embarrassed, unclipped conversations with suspicious ears. He slipped the card into his wallet. It was a passport, allowing him to move out of his predictable, habitual, and deliberately boring world he had created for himself. Whether he would make that move was another matter. Predictable and boring worlds were safe. Meeting with Gemma Lumarine was a bit like trying to shake hands with a whirlwind. Today was Tuesday, smoked haddock day. Tomorrow was Wednesday, stuffed tomatoes and boiled potatoes. And on Thursday, the last quarter of the roast beef would be finished. In 3 weeks, it was officially summer, and his whole menu would have to be changed to salads and lighter meals. His organization made him feel good. The house was spotless, thanks to his cleaning timetable, and this Saturday was maintenance day for the house, the garden, and the car. It was a routine that his despair, anger, and self-pity had bounced against for the last 5 years, ever since she had gone. In the hall, he stared hard again at sorry. Why suddenly had a word that had almost toppled him over the precipice for years suddenly lost its hate? For the first 2 years, just a glance towards the frame ignited fury that had sucked him into a whirlpool of a depression. If ever he needed his wife, it was when he returned home from Iraq. She was his thread back to reality. The anticipation as he turned into his roads after 2 years of killing pumped his emotions to breaking point. The disappointment of not seeing her among the other wives and relatives at the airport vanished as he pushed open the door. "Jennifer!" His yell of exuberance sliced down the hall, but then bounced, strangely flat, back. The clatter of his kit dropping in the hall and his push on the sitting room door was slow and puzzled, as it was in the kitchen, the bedroom, and the back garden. His house was empty. Sure, the furniture and just about everything else was as he'd left, except for her wardrobe. The row of fluffies had gone. Her drawers of clothes, her handbags, shoes, even her toothbrush no longer bowed towards him from its tumbler. The frantic phone calls to friends and relatives, interrupted by the delight at hearing him, increased the shock, gripping his throat. His wife had vanished. His scream and the coffee table crashing through the window brought the neighbours running. Her card, sorry, propped on the table against an empty fruit bowl, had been sneering at him for 2 minutes before he had snapped. The neighbour's expression as the truth clicked in was, he realised, pity that he was going to have to get used to. And life had not stopped turning his mangle. Within 2 months, he was flattened again, tossed out of his cherished career. His 22 faultless years of service saved his professional reference. The army does not keep sergeants they cannot trust. He was offered redundancy due to defence cuts, instead of kills more friends than foe. It was a month before he loomed out of his alcoholic mist. Dropping the bottle, he slowly and painfully picked life up again. For 2 days following his return, he searched for her. Her disappearance was as neat and tidy and effective as the way she lived. There were no clues in loose ends. Everything that could be closed was. 1 month's notices were given with always the same reason. She was joining her husband in army married quarters. Yes, the neighbours had met his brother. A very nice man, had the family likeness, a bit younger, seemed to have plenty of money, was well dressed, and drove a very expensive car. Money. The word reached out and grabbed him. Yes, a reason had suddenly presented itself. Jennifer had a problem with money. She never had enough. His army and her nurse's pay had never balanced her books. There always had been a dress or a pair of shoes too far for their bank balance. No, she wouldn't. Yes, she had. His bank statement was littered with zeros. The dagger, twisting inside him, plunged deeper. Not only had she left, now the cold, efficient, and effective way she had blocked him out of her life meant her main wish was for him never to see her again. His last hope, her sister, slumped beside him in genuine astonishment at his visit. It seemed his wife's love for his brother surmounted even family ties. Her sister knew nothing. It was life's pace in the army that nagged him back. He could not go on sleeping his days and drinking his nights away. Active duty and discipline rebelled against his physical inertia. He found a job with a small security firm, deliberately choosing a peace and quiet, dead-end existence, as his fragile mentality could no longer compete with colleagues, with life, or anything. The few women who approached hit his isolation. Polite but empty words and a flash of contempt from hard blue eyes eased them out of his space, allowing their female instinct to lead their retreat from a mind packed with bitterness. But today, sorry was not biting. He reached up and took the frame down, logic focusing his thinking. Nothing new had happened today to change his existence, except being lassoed by Gemma Lumarine. Chapter 3. Hello. His heart and just about every part of his body leapt. It was her. Fortunately, he had wedged the telephone receiver between his chin and his shoulder, otherwise it would have dropped into the washing up bowl. She was calling for his chest, waist, and leg measurements for the uniform. Rushing around for a tape measure amplified his excitement and fumbling. This woman was having an unsettling effect upon him, something he shouldn't frown about, but he wasn't. Tucking the measure into his crutch and wrapping the other end around his heel was obviously no problem, but reading the result accurately was. It took several attempts before the obvious surfaced. Reversing the tape, he trod on the first inch, then read the result by squinting forward and subtracting an inch. Thanks. The phone clicked dead. Stupidly, he looked at the receiver. 44 chest, 32-inch leg was all he had said. The conversation had lasted 8 words, yet he was still trembling. No, she was not having an unsettling effect upon him, more like devastating. The phone call had been a link, a contact. They were together again. Thinking about her and feeling the tingles wriggling was changing his days. Wednesday was lagging beyond Monday and Tuesday, 2 time-wasting pests. It was going to be weird with the uniform kick, but it fitted with the bored, rich woman picture he was getting. It was obvious. Anything went with Gemma Lumarine. Maybe he was weird as well, getting involved with her. He was lifting his leg over the side of his nest here. He knew her address and telephone number, and that was all. She must be about 35, he reckoned. A wife? A mother? Those were questions that were none of his business. Women were trouble. Women were devious. Women were unnecessary. Women... The list he chanted regularly churned on. The shutters at the thought of a relationship building were slamming down. The hell of being dumped still lingered, holding him immobile, staring at the telephone. His thoughtful pause as he replaced the receiver was shattered immediately. The phone rang, his surprise ending in a quick snatch of the receiver. "Jerom, darling." She was back. Did she hear his quick intake of breath? "You missed one." "One what?" "Your waist measurement." Quickly, he threaded himself around the tape and stuttered out the size. Again, the phone went dead. But she had called him darling. No small talk, information received, call finished. She had what she wanted. She didn't waste her time. That evening, his pleasure over his measuring ingenuity was dashed at bedtime. The sizes were shrieking from the label on his waistband. But then another thought started to shriek. His number was ex-directory, yet Gemma Lumarine had it. She was unsettling and devastating, but now his description of the Gemma effect had an addition. She was mystifying. In fact, he thought, Gemma Lumarine was a bit of a missile. Although he could not know it, it was a description that was to prove accurate during his very next lunch hour. The Lumarine rocket hit from across the road. Jerom was meandering towards his usual junk food den in the high street. A gaping mouth and eyes crazed with surprise in the middle of his astonished face established the target had been hit. Lumarine. The name was shrieking at him from across the road, diagonally in bright yellow on a black banner slashed across a shop window. He could have been run over. He would have been run over. Crossing a busy high street in a daze is a do-it-yourself suicide. Fortunately, the traffic lights were as red as his gaze, absorbed by the window display. The bookshop had gone overboard for Nicholas Lumarine. His volumes filled the window in artistically arranged groups. Between pictures of the writer, a blow-up of his bio uncurled down the back of the display. The 7 words at the end of the blurb, where he lives with his wife Gemma, completed Jerom's astonishment. The unusual name, her confident authority, quality appearance, and her tan of success matched it immediately, slotting wife Gemma in as his brand new weirdo. He would check, but he had no doubt he had discovered who his new girlfriend was. Stupidly, he realized he could have checked her out on the internet, and there was no escape from the great author inside the shop. A pile-high, seldom cheap wall of his epics shrieked from the prime position opposite the entrance. The books were fat, value-for-money 800 pages, with a picture of the author on the front cover, grinning over the title. He looked a happy guy, although the photographer had been cunning, cutting off the top of his head and chopping part of his lower chin, allowing focusing only on the huge smile. Who wouldn't want to buy a book from a man who was obviously bubbling fun? "You'll like that." The skinny, bespectacled, white-faced assistant, who looked as though she lived on dust, nodded as he tapped out his PIN number. "I can't wait for the next." Nicholas Lumarine was big business. The women behind Jerom were both cuddling his smiling face to their breasts. Jerom was not a great reader. Crime novels he read from time to time, but Nicholas Lumarine's book buried his interest after a few pages. He tried to read the book 3 times, but the smiling face was deceptive. There were few chuckles in the wild adventure packed between the covers. There was plenty of sex, there was plenty of violence, and there was plenty of money. Themes designed to move the tomes, but which Jerom found repetitive and tedious. His fingers, triggered open by boredom, allowed the book to sink into the bedclothes. Nicholas Lumarine's webpage established that his Gemma and the wife of the world-renowned author were either identical twins or the same woman. The couple appeared in photographs of first nights with other celebrities, swanning around a yacht and other various high-powered venues. The more he discovered about his strange new friend, the more the question loomed. Why him? Was it the thrill she got from picking him up? Was it definitely a bit of slumming? Or was she really attracted? He could not believe that, not with the accessories she had. She had money, she had connections, she was tripping over film stars, celebrities, and some of the most desirable men in the world. A number 65 bus and Jerom Archer just did not gel with her well-heeled heaven. Okay, she wanted a partner for some offbeat sex scenes. She could buy offbeat sex scenes. She wanted sex on demand. She could buy sex on demand. She could buy anything. He could not find a reason for him in her life, and yet tomorrow, Wednesday, she was coming again to meet him in the mean little hotel. Imagine what will happen in the next episode of Imagine, coming in 2 weeks.